For a role like Olympia, I'm on stage for one scene. I spend quite a bit of time in the practice room beforehand, in my dressing room, making sure that everything's in line, right? Olympia feels like a sprint. It has to be perfect, and you have 5 minutes. Sophie's somewhere in the middle. She's like the 400-meter relay. I've been watching a lot of Olympics lately, can you tell? And Gilda is like a marathon. It actually feels a lot like having a baby.
On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cederquist, joined by Oliver Camacho, Weston Williams, and Ashlee Hardgrave. Season 7 starts right now. This week, Oliver goes inside the huddle with a star soprano who sometimes feels like a circus performer with all the high-flying, high-pressure roles she sings. Plus, she compares singing Lucia di Lammermoor to giving birth. Yup, the incredible Erin Morley. It's a big get for the season opener, plus 2-minute drill. We repeat the mantra yet again. Grumpy old dad man. No kids at the opera. No, not even if they're on stage. It is so great to be back with the whole team. I'm so glad that Matt Cummings has finally left the show. I'm kidding, of course. It is also great to be back on the Dallas Opera Network. And look, if you're watching on TDO, here's what you want to do. You want to subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher Radio. You can even just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. That way you get the full entire thing. So much to catch up on. This is going to be such a great show. This is going to be such a great season. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. Oliver Camacho.
I knew it. So much heartbreak in this year's U.S. Open. Naomi Osaka went out early to the eventual finalist of the U.S. Open. The women's draw is a mess right now without Serena Williams.
It's a wrap.
But all the young people are coming through, and actually the final match and the finalists were really exciting to watch. Leylah Fernandez from Canada, who turned 19 during the tournament, and the eventual winner, the qualifier, Emma Raducanu from England. And it was just they're both of Asian descent or have Asian in their background. So I'm like, yes, it's time for the Asians to take over this white sport. And then in the men's draw, heartbreaker early on, Stefanos Tsitsipas, my future husband, lost early.
No, Oliver, I'm so sorry.
I know. I have a new additional love. His name is Felix Auger-Aliassime. He is beautiful, and he made it all the way to the semis, and there are so many good things ahead for him, including being my other husband. And
Other husband.
Sort of something wonderful but sad that happened is that Novak Djokovic was assumed to complete the calendar year Grand Slam, but he fell to the eventual winner, Daniil Medvedev, who wins his first Grand Slam and stops history from happening. It was tragic. And Novak Djokovic, who is like the most unbeatable player in the past 5 years, he cried into his towel, and I actually finally felt for him. I've always had this weird relationship with him. I think he's too robotic and just not human enough, Yeah.
Well, he's always been a little bit like Pete Sampras, no kind of emotion. And finally with that loss, we really started to see that. So, Weston Williams here as well. Weston Williams, catch us up. How have the weeks off treated you?
Weirdly busy. I managed to jump in on the whole trend of things coming back in what may be the last days of the pandemic, and got myself employed, which is exciting. Oliver and I are now coworkers. So I've got the HR forms for you whenever the episode's done, George. You can just sign those and make sure everything's, I's dotted, T's crossed. We should be good to go.
I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, Weston, but Ashlee Hardgrave just might. Ashlee, what's happening?
So many things. Apparently, there's an emergency right outside my window. If you couldn't hear the siren that is blazing by as right when you asked how I was doing. I was like, well, I was fine until you came by. No, things were good. I got a chance to like see some people and take a little mini vacation, go to the beach, which was amazing. But if we want to talk about like the most amazing thing that happened, it was when my unranked Razorbacks went ahead and beat number 15 Texas this weekend. And guys, it wasn't even close. It was really incredible. I was actually coming back from a work trip and I was watching the game on the plane from Houston. And so I don't know if anybody else was watching, but every now and then you'd hear, and it was like collective. So somebody was watching it on the plane. But of course you don't want to make those noises while you're on a plane. It was very interesting. But the cool thing about it was like, you know, Texas and Arkansas have this like rivalry that goes back a long time. They haven't been in the same conference for quite some time. But you know, with all of this talk of Texas leaving the Big 12 to come and join the cool kids in the SEC, I was like, you might want to rethink that because you just got walloped by one of the most questionable teams in the Southeastern Conference. But I said it a couple of weeks ago on the listener mailbag. I'm going to say it now. Now that Sam Pittman has been there for a year as the coach of the Razorbacks, he's got a year of coaching and a year of recruiting under his belt. He's really put together an incredible, incredible team, which is good because he needs to raise some money because Arkansas also got fined $100,000 by the SEC for all of the students storming the field in excitement after they beat Texas.
Worth every penny, probably. Here in Chicago, the Bears lose their season opener. When did Trubisky get replaced by Dalton? I totally missed that. And more to the point, when will Dalton be replaced by Shields? I think that's what most Bears fans are looking forward to. Cowboys also lose the openers for the TDO folk to the Bucks. Let's get season 7 going. The stars have aligned. First show of our season 7. The opera houses are opening up again as we launch the 2021-2022 season. We're going to be talking about this all year long, I'm sure. We want to try and just unpack a little bit, starting here in Chicago, opening the conversation up to the whole nation about what is this season going to look like? Oliver Camacho, what gives you pause for thought? Where your eyes and your ears and your heart, where are they looking first and what's on your mind?
Well, I know that we're going to pass over to Ashlee any second now to talk about what we all watched over the weekend, but it's coming up this weekend in Chicago. It's a good example of what companies are doing to respond to the new situation. Chicago Opera Theater will open their season with a concert performance, 60% capacity of Carmen, which is not in their repertoire at all. But I spoke to Lydia Yankovskaya, and she said, you know what? You know, we needed to figure out what we're going to do this year. We had to change our plan for the original show that was going to be on the calendar. And she's friends with Jamie Barton, and Jamie Barton has always wanted to sing Carmen, and nobody has offered her that chance. It's okay, well, we're going to do it in Chicago. And we're going to do a concert version. And we're going to have Stephanie Blythe sing Don Jose.
Literally phenomenal.
So,
I cannot tell you how excited I am about this.
So Stephanie,
please continue.
So Stephanie Blythe does this tenor shtick. Her name is Blithely Oratonio, I think is the name.
I think so.
And yeah, and so Stephanie Blythe actually has a legit dramatic tenor voice, and she wants to sing Cavaradossi. And Lydia Yankovskaya was like, well, I don't know if we can do a Tosca here, but we can do this weird ass Carmen. So that's happening just in a couple of days from now. By the time you hear this podcast, it will be really happening. And at the same time, Lyric Opera of Chicago is trying to cautiously reopen. I think they're also doing limited capacity. I don't even know if they're doing that, but they're opening with their new seats. But that we've been talking about their brand. That's how they spent their COVID, installing new chairs.
You get to find out if I actually fit in the new seats, which will be exciting.
And they have none other than Sandra Rabinovsky singing Lady Macbeth. And we talked about this 2 years ago when Sandra was supposed to make her role debut at Opera Philadelphia singing Lady Macbeth. But then 2020 happened, as you know, and that got canceled. So Sandra's actually making this very important role debut here in Chicago. So Chicagoans are lucky to have Sandra Rabinovsky and Jamie Barton and Stephanie Blythe and also Eileen Perez in the first couple of weeks of the opera season. Eileen Perez and Charles Casanovo are singing Elixir of Love right after the opening of Lady Macbeth, of Macbeth. Yeah.
It's a strong opening here in Chicago. Ashlee, does it get you excited? Does it give you pause for thought for folks going back into venues?
I mean, I will answer that question in a moment. But the first thing I want to say is that it is an embarrassment of riches. We always, think of Chicago as, well, many people that don't live here think of Chicago as like not a metropolitan area, especially people that I meet from the coast are like, but Chicago's in the Midwest. Isn't that farming? And I'm like, not downtown. It's not. We have one of the major cultural centers of the United States. We have the third largest city in the country.
Tell them from me, just, you know what? Cram it.
Or as Toby would say, kick rocks.
Yes, kick rocks.
I only cultivated one row of corn this week. What are you talking about?
I know. I do technically still have tomatoes in my fire escape garden, but we're nearing the end of the harvest. Does it give me pause? Yes, officially it does. Because being around any group of more than 5 people at a time currently gives me pause. I was one of those people that actually did okay in the pandemic because I was like, oh, I don't like people as much as I thought I did. And if I get to sit in my house with my cat, cool. So being around groups of people, I've been slowly kind of trying to reacclimate myself into that environment like I think many of us have. And I'll give you an example. I sing a lot of weddings. I'm a cantor. And I have been fortunate enough to go back and do some of those for a big chapel up on the north side of the city in a Jesuit university. And I'm up in the loft pretty much by myself with the organist. And one of the wedding photographers wandered up there, and because he's just moving around and doing his job, he's not really paying that much attention. He's just getting to where he needs to get the shot. He got close to me, and by close I mean he was about here, and I jumped. That's how much it spooked me to have somebody be close to me.
Yeah.
So And even when Oliver and I a couple weeks ago went to the opening of, what was the festival, Oliver? I forget. What was
Opera Festival Chicago.
That's it. Thank you. Even that, I was so excited to be in the room. Also, it was just fun to have an Oliver hang, but it was so fun to be in the room with live music happening, but I couldn't help but be on edge the entire time because, again, I'm in this group of people that I haven't been in a while. We have people expelling force from their respiratory systems, even though they're down on the floor and we were up on the second level. So yeah, I've got some pause about it, but I feel like there are a number of people that are being very thoughtful and very genuine in their approach. I know we're going to talk about the Verdi Requiem in a little bit, but you could see as the choristers were coming onto the stage, they were masked. They took down their masks right before the performance began. There were some members of the orchestra that continued to have their masks on the entire time. So I think enough people are being thoughtful about it that we can move forward, albeit very slowly.
Weston,
Right.
Let's expand the convo then to include the Met, get to the national picture and kind of the granddaddy of them all. So yeah, the Verdi Requiem, the first time that a show happens inside Lincoln Center since March of 2020.
Yeah. It's one of those moments that, I'm kind of in two minds about it. In some ways, seeing it happen, was, extraordinary, obviously. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, unfortunately. But it was, neither did anyone else, but we'll talk about that later. On one hand, I'm like, yes, this is finally it. I can finally see some things. But at the same time, looking over in Europe, with just a little bit of caution and a little bit of, thinking things through and making sure the right organizations are funded, they've been having performances, this whole time with relative safety. And it made me kind of sad that I didn't have that. But at the same time, it was so exciting to see it sort of coming around. This was the first, during this break was the first time I've seen live music, since the beginning of the pandemic. I went to, the Lyric in the Park and, sort of a preview show for the Lyric and, also Music of the Broke, where we saw our very own Matt Cummings. That was exciting.
Who dead to us.
Dead to us. We'll never see him again unless you all Venmo me $500, dear listeners. Anyway, I do think that there is, it's a real mix of emotions. I find myself readying myself to buy tickets for, the season, and also like wanting to wait till like the very last second, there's like this little nagging voice that says, don't spend your money just yet. You don't know where it's going to go. I mean, at the very least, the Lyric is making a very bold choice by opening the first season since the pandemic with Macbeth. I'm not a superstitious person, but an interesting choice. But seeing the Met full, hopefully safe, everyone was vaccinated, and performing a requiem that really is all about rebirth and things like that is really, really remarkable.
Well, just to state the obvious, Europe takes less of a risk in trying to stage stuff because they're not relying on ticket sales and
absolutely
private donors to put on shows. So that's why American houses have to be more cautious about when things get started up again. So we are taking a big risk by even planning these seasons and getting these artists into these, opera houses for rehearsals, not knowing if we're going to have to shut it down again because of the Delta variant. But before we go to our interview, we did just want to rhapsodize on this Verdi Requiem.
Y'all.
We saw on PBS, most of us did, like you said, or all of it or none of it. So just seeing that many people on the stage it gave me feels, just seeing them there. And then Yannick Nézet-Séguin knows this piece so well. And I think he conducted it
really
in Philadelphia, and he's memorized it. And, they had a camera trained right on him. And even before the first chord, you could see he got into the mood, and he was communicating that through the camera. Like, we're going to do this, people, and I felt it. I was glued to the TV that night on Saturday. Actually, I was supposed to go see a show here in Chicago, but I decided to go and watch that instead. And there were some technical glitches, and the mic feed from Misty Copeland wasn't working at first. He hosted it. And there was some sometimes not welcome cutaways to Lincoln Center where they were projecting like the movement names. Like, okay, that's fine. But then there were some cutaways where they just like showed like, the last piece of iron that's preserved in the 9/11 memorial. It's like, oh, and they show names of the people on the memorial and her unborn child. I'm like, oh God, no. And and then there was the singing, and it was glorious. And Eric Owens he was filled with the ghost. And I'll let Ashlee wants to talk. I'll let you carry on.
I could talk about so many parts of it, but one other thing I want to talk about are the stakes of this and how many multiple stakes there were. This is a return to the first performance indoors since the beginning of the pandemic. This is the first time all of these people are around each other since the beginning of the pandemic. We're making music in the way that we did in the before times. We're also doing it on the 20th anniversary of one of the worst terrorist attacks in our country's history. And it's a very deeply personal thing, especially for all Americans, but especially for New Yorkers. And so many of the people in that ensemble are, lifelong or very long time New Yorkers. So you have the emotional weight and stakes of just getting back to work and the joy that you should be feeling in getting to do your job again and that thing that you love. But then you also have the stakes of commemorating this really awful moment of loss. And so it's the nth degree. It's the zenith and the nadir of both ends of the spectrum, ultimate joy and ultimate loss and grief. So just having that sort of weight on your chest when you're even thinking about what all of this represents when you walk in the door or when you turn on your television. Or, anybody who is a musician to an opera fan to whomever, this is a big deal. And the amount of nerves that went into that, I can't even imagine how Yannick must have felt in that moment. My God. When it comes to the singing, honey, let's talk about it. I mean, all four of the soloists were incredible. Here's what I'll tell you. I started to think because the Verdi Requiem is a big sing. It's a big sing for everybody. It's a big sing for the choristers. It's a big sing for all four soloists. Eileen Perez deserves a medal and a Grammy and an Oscar and an Emmy, like all at once, just for this. In fact, because it was on TV, she might end up getting an Emmy nomination. We'll see. But it's such a big thing. And to have all of those stakes on top of this, she also just got engaged. So like, you know, lots going on in her life at the moment. And then holy cow, to come in and sing the Libra Me the way that she sang it. I was face down in my couch at one point because I was so overwhelmed. I didn't know what else to do because I was so nervous on her behalf.
So we have
now you know how I felt in Euro 2020.
So we have to wrap this up, but I just want to say
course.
that all the singers on that stage are technicians, but every one of them. But I think we would probably be safe to say that like Eileen is the one who takes the most risks, and she sang 80% of the Requiem in floated pianissimi, which is not her bread and butter, but she just went for it, and you could tell how hard she was working. She was sweating, you know, and then she saved her most savage tone for the Libra Me, and I knew that it was coming, but I was thinking, is she gonna have voice after singing an hour in pianissimo? Will she be able to open up the tone again? And boy, did she open up the tone. I was like,
wow. I mean, yeah. And as the person on the panel who has sung that piece and sung that role, we'll call it, because it's basically an operatic role.
It's Aida. I mean, yeah.
It is. It's fully Aida. And coming into the Libra, it's kind of a weirdly... It's not anticlimactic, but you would assume that the end of a piece would have like all of the soloists and bombast and, you know, and it does in fact have that. But the soprano's the only one that's standing up. Everybody else is like, we're done. We're sitting. And Michelle and Matt and Eric, oh my God, they were amazing. So like well-deserved sit and rest and bring in those accolades. But to have that moment of like, you know, you've sung this really, really challenging thing, and then out of nowhere, you have to pull from your hindquarters a C, like out of nowhere. And in 15 seconds, when the orchestra comes in, you're going to know whether or not you did it correctly. And by then it's too late if you've, you know, butchered it. So I have lots of PTSD. I don't know if you can tell from singing the Libra Me. But in those moments, it's just like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And you know she's going to get it because she's Eileen. I was also okay if she didn't because she'd already done so many amazing things. But yeah, it was, I really was ready for it to be a little bit dirtier and a little bit rougher just because of all of the aforementioned emotional stakes. I was like, this is not a moment where you're listening to this for technical greatness. You're listening to this for the emotion and the commemoration. And then it just so happened that everybody was technically fantastic. So
lots more to
claps
watch
all around
on this season as it comes up. How is it going to play out? What's going to happen to it? We're going to be talking you through that all season long on the OBS. Inside the Huddle, it's right now.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
We have been saving this one in the bank. This is an interview that I recorded with Erin Morley at Santa Fe Opera while she was singing the role of Titania in A Midsummer Night's Dream. We're such big fans for her here. We talked about her performance in the online gala last year where she accompanied herself in Chacun le Sait and how she won everybody's hearts. I first was introduced to her singing actually not too long ago when she sang Sophie in the Rosenkavalier that was Renee Fleming's farewell performance. And to be a part of that event, Alina Garancha was saying goodbye to the role of Octavian, and Renee Fleming was saying goodbye to the role of Marceline. How do you compete with that? She just sang a pristine Sophie and looked the part and everything. So yeah, she definitely gained my respect the first time I heard her. She was also recently on Aria Code, a podcast that maybe I listened to, talking about talking about Olympia. And she's just one of these singers that just has this incredible technical capability. And I tried to get her to talk about her technique and how she, goes past technique to develop characterizations for her roles, because she's such a great performer, not just technically. And we'll enter the conversation right here. You'll hear a snippet of it as she talks about how she prepares for different roles and how she relies on athleticism and maybe compares what she does to athletic things. But for the full conversation, you have to get the podcast where you get podcasts on Stitcher or on Apple Podcasts. But here's just a little bit of that conversation.
There really is not that much different about how I, for instance, warm up for those two roles, because I truly believe that one has to sing every role with their voice. And so I have to warm up my voice in such a way that I have control over all of its faculties. That means that I'm able to sing Sophie at the drop of a hat, and I can sing Gilda at the drop of a hat. That's the goal anyway, right? You have to take care of all aspects of the voice at all times. I warm up to the extremes of my range before every role that I sing. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't go as high as an A flat, but I need my voice to feel as if it can do anything. And that goes for the low range as well. The length of the role does inform how I warm up to an extent. So I might warm up a little bit more for Sophie than I would for Gilda, because Gilda has a longer night than Sophie. Gilda's on stage more than Sophie is. And so I can't afford to expend too much energy before the show starts. Whereas with Sophie, I can afford to take a little bit more time to really finesse things and to go through things and to make sure that I have this exactly as I want it to be. For a role like Olympia, I'm on stage for one scene. So I spend quite a bit of time in the practice room beforehand, in my dressing room, making sure that everything's in line, right? There are some roles that kind of feel, Olympia feels like a sprint. She's sort of like a bat out of the cage, and it has to be perfect, and you have 5 minutes, right? And that's all you have. That feels like a sprint. And so I spend a lot more time really gearing up for that moment backstage. Sophie's somewhere in the middle. She's like the 400-meter relay. I've been watching a lot of Olympics lately. Can you tell? And Gilda is like a marathon, or Lucia, right? It's like a marathon. It's like running a marathon. It actually feels a lot like having a baby.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
It's good call, bad call. It's the way we end every show here on the OBS. We're going to start with Oliver Camacho.
I want to draw our Philadelphia audience attention to a new opera company called Alter Ego Chamber Opera, which is going to perform their version of Handel's Alcina. They're calling it Alcina Revamped as part of the Philadelphia Fringe Festival, September 24th and 26th. Emphasizing the queer aspects of the Handel opera, and instrumentation includes electric guitar and saxophone.
Ooh.
Okay,
Fantastic.
then.
Really great choice.
Saucy
of
orchestration.
Weston Williams.
I'm glad to just be starting the season with the opportunity to give a good call. Unfortunately, I don't have one, so.
Wow. Ashlee Hardgrave.
You guys are my good call. I'm just so glad to be back. No, I was looking forward to coming back to this. I'm very much looking forward to COT this weekend. And also, I am looking forward to catching up on Apple TV Plus now that I freaking have it. I'm late to the party, but I figured with my travel season for my other job, I would have lots of sitting around time, which means nobody tell me anything about Ted Lasso or Schmigadoon, because I have a lot to catch up on.
I'm also glad that the show is back. This is such a great team of folks to be with. Again, this is the only place in America where week in, week out, we talk about opera. No one else does this. And certainly no one else mixes opera with our passion for sports. We have so many great interviews coming up, some new segments on the books this season. You want to stick around. You do not want to miss it. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer is Norm Woodel. He's at normwoodel.com. On Facebook, search for Opera Box Score. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at Opera Box Score. You can help us deepen our bench of listeners by liking and sharing our social media posts. You can email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on Stitcher. You just favorite the show on Apple Podcasts. Our creative consultants, Oliver Camacho. audio and video editors Weston Williams. For your co-host, Ashlee Hardgrave, and he's out there somewhere, Matt Cummings. I'm George Cederquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera during those lengthy football TV timeouts. We're back with an all-new show next week when pianist Irina Meacham and her husband Lucas go inside the huddle to preview their upcoming album. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and maybe Matt. Join us.